To order the City of Hayden Planning and Zoning Commission. Today is the 7th, right? February 7th, 2022. Next would be a roll call of commission members.
So, Chair Davis,
I'm present.
Commissioner Gibson,
Present.
Commissioner Howard,
Present.
Commissioner Prickett,
Present.
Vice Chair Taylor,
Present.
and Commissioner Bemis is absent.
Okay. So the Pledge of Allegiance comes next, right? Give them all leave. Please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm still firming up my notes. There's a point where we ask if anybody has any conflicts with anything tonight. Is that now or is that later?
You're hanging with me for a while.
What's that?
You're hanging with me for a while.
Okay. That's an old one I use for notes.
Oh, yeah, so call for any changes to the agenda and then any corrections
Okay.
or additions and then your.
And then, oh, it's right there in front of me. How about that? Put a star right there. I'll get this down. All right, so do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda tonight?
Are you asking staff? No.
Okay. Does anyone have any of the commissioners have any conflict of interest with the agenda items tonight?
No.
No.
No. Okay. It looks like the next item is the consent calendar, which consists of approval of meeting minutes from January 3rd, 2022, approval of written recommendation for PZE-21-0242.
Second.
Okay. So please indicate yes or no. I approve. Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so moved. I hit the stupid thing. Thank you. Yes, thank you. All right, now we're going to go into the public hearing. And the first one up is PZE-21-0241, the Thousand Hills Zone Map Amendment. Zach, would you kick us off?
Good evening,
Thank you.
Commissioners. Planner Zach Trevino for the record, presenting case number PZE-21-0241. This is a zone map amendment request. The applicant and owner is Thousand Hills. It's an LLC, and the representative is here tonight. The request is to change the zoning designation of the parcels from commercial to mixed use. This is a project that's located east of Government Way. And just giving some background before I show the aerial. Originally, this property owner wanted to change the zone to residential multifamily. That was in 2019, and they did submit a zone map amendment application requesting that change at that time. And it went through the process up through the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation. At the time, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of that request. but it did not proceed to a final decision by council because the applicant decided to place that application on hold. There were a couple of reasons for this. One was the pending future land use map adoption, and at the time, there was a sense that there may be a citywide zone map amendment, and so the applicant wanted to place the application on hold. Secondly, that was mid-COVID, and there were some delays that resulted from COVID-19. And so in May 2021, you'll recall that the city distributed letters to property owners regarding that citywide zone map amendment based on the recently adopted comprehensive plan and the future land use map. And subsequently, that was discontinued and they did not proceed with that citywide zone map amendment. And so this applicant submitted a new request to change the zone of the parcel to mixed use after withdrawing that former request. And so here we are today, almost exactly 2 years after the Planning Commission originally considered the zone map amendment on this parcel, but we're looking at a different zone, a different proposal. And I should say parcels, this is 2 parcels adjacent, 1 property totaling 1.263 acres approximately, and it does have a single family residence. It is in an area with multiple zoning designations, and this is important background before we dive into the applicant's presentation, where it's currently zoned commercial. To the north is a planned unit development, Avery Estates. And you'll see that that's partially zoned commercial, partially residential multifamily, but the PUD is an overlay. And that type and style of residential development is really only able to be found in the mixed use zone today, although at a reduced density from what they achieved there. To the east is single family residential, it's undeveloped. South along Government Way is more commercial, and then there's some residential multifamily. Some of these commercial parcels do have residential dwelling units on them. And so the property's vicinity is a mix of uses today. That home that exists is non-conforming, and that means that it can persist. It can't be expanded because today the commercial zone does not allow residential uses. And so at that, I'll turn it over to the applicant who is here. Olson Engineering is the firm that submitted the application, along with Jeremy Chizuli, the representative, and again, the owner is 1,000 Hills. And they do have a presentation that I'll pull up here.
Zach, can I ask a question?
Please.
Am I able to ask you a question?
If it's a clarifying question, yes. I'll have questions later as well as I go into further detail.
2 questions. One is, under the current, actually it's only 1 question. So that's the current zone, correct?
Correct.
Do you have a picture of what the future land use map zoning looks like?
I do, and I could pull that up briefly now. I'll go into it a little more detail later.
Okay.
It actually is designated as mixed use on the future land use map.
And then behind it is mixed residential?
That is correct, to the east. And I'll definitely go into that in greater detail. If that helps sets the stage though, I'm glad that you asked.
Okay.
Let me pull up the applicant's presentation and turn it over to them.
How do I advance again? I always forget.
Either next or the mouse.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Terzulli, Olson Engineering Project Coordinator, representing 1,000 Hills LLC. Chris Cheeley is joining us tonight, and he would like to speak a little bit later in my presentation. Zach stole a little bit of my thunder early, so forgive me as I work through this. As he mentioned, we did bring this request to you guys a couple of years ago, and for all the reasons he stated and then some, put it on pause back before you today in order to now hopefully adopt the mixed use zoning designation. And Chris is the landowner, right? Yes, Chris Cheeley. As with any of these requests, we're held to a certain criteria that we're to be, that you guys are to analyze and to see if we've met that criteria. Those standards of approval are here, and I'm sure they're part of the staff report and Zach's presentation. I'm going to go through those throughout this presentation. I don't exactly knock them out in order. I kind of take the first one as to whether or not the amendments amendments to the zoning map, zone text shall be in accordance with the future land use map goals, policies found in the comprehensive plan. So there is a snip of the project site. As you can see, we are requesting mixed use. That's the purple area. The purple area, the yellow box identifies this property. And then throughout the comprehensive plan that was adopted a couple of years ago, there's a lot of discussion about the need for additional housing, workforce housing, service-based industry, entry-level housing, those types of things. So we believe clearly that this proposal is covered and consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. Amendments to the zoning map and zone text shall align with the zone district's purpose and intent. So when staff, who I felt did a great job when they reconstructed the zoning map, the future land use map, and ultimately made amendments to Title 11 of Hayden City Code, what happened there, there's going to be a sunset on the multifamily zoning designation. Therefore, we kind of waited it out to see how this was all going to play out, and so the request is for the mixed-use zoning. The mixed-use zone, and this is pulled straight out of Hayden City Code, the mixed-use zone provides for both residential, multifamily, and commercial land use types, creating a flexible environment for either one or the other or both. And as Zach pointed out, throughout this area of Hayden, there is some commingling of commercial uses as well as residential, higher density, medium density, and then it moves on into single family as it moves east. So a few of the items that I think support this. The end game here is for the owner to construct a series of two-story apartment buildings, fourplexes, some covered parking on site. As I mentioned, the mixed-use zoning designation was a deliberate attempt to help integrate commercial multifamily zoning to, in essence, sort of allow the market to determine where demand was at any given time and offer a little bit of fluidity with the process. Previously, multifamily would have been allowed in the commercial zoning through a special use permit, and another sort of cleaning up the zoning, as I recall through some of the workshops, was to not have commercial zonings with SUP overlays and just sort of create a more cohesive, fluid zoning designations throughout the city. And as Zach pointed out, to the north, there was a plan unit development at Avery Estates, which allowed for that multifamily there. So the adoption of the mixed use, the mixed residential, which didn't exist a couple of years ago, was to sort of clean up some of the zoning issues within Hayden and create this tiering effect. You have your commercial corridors, you have your major arterials, your collectors, to try to concentrate higher impact development along those areas, and then sort of tier the intensity as you move away from those high traffic, high impact areas until you move into more traditional single family residence. So we feel that this flows perfectly with that design and that concept. Another standard of approval is whether or not the request is consistent with the community needs, the public health, safety, and general welfare, as I recall. I think you would have need to be living under a rock to not know that housing in our area is probably the biggest issue community-wide. So we believe that as far as community needs are concerned, it is paramount. It's front and center. It's part of every discussion at every planning and zoning commission meeting I go to. It's obviously been a hot button issue in Hayden as we get to this point. So all indications are that is front and center with regard to community needs. When we talk about public health, safety, general welfare, those tend to be more subjective. And so I would encourage anybody, the council, this commission, I think it's going to be imperative that we sort of take what the community needs are, understand that anytime that you add housing or addition to the population, that there are going to be trade-offs, and that we kind of have to weigh those community needs versus what it does to help safety, and almost run a cost-benefit analysis on how we do that. Right now, I've stood before this commission at least a half dozen times over the last 18 months talking about this same issue with other projects. There is an opposition to it from some members of the community, but right now, housing is completely unattainable for nearly 75% of our population if they were to have to enter the housing market today. And that is statistics that can be backed up, recent articles at Coeur d'Alene Press and throughout the community. With regard to public health and safety, infrastructure is readily available in government way. Redesigning of this site right now, redevelopment of this site would actually hold it to current standards, current design standards with regard to stormwater, ADA slopes, property line setbacks, landscape buffers, those types of things. Redevelopment of this site would actually probably aid public health and safety, as the existing conditions on the site. It's a very old home. It's about at its useful life. It has an old gravel driveway. There's no accommodations for stormwater on site, and as you'll see in a later slide, the structure currently sits nearly at a zero lot line on the north without an insufficient firewall there, so it is completely outdated and does not comply with current code. In addition to public health and safety, if you look at Avery Estates, which is directly to the north, there are a number of uses that would be currently allowed outright. No coming before Planning and Zoning Commission, no coming before City Council, simply going down to the city and applying for a use. And I've listed some of those right here.
You've been paying attention to the questions we ask.
It's not my first rodeo. So again, a lot of the terms in the decision criteria can be very subjective. And I would encourage everyone, community-wide, not just this commission, not just council, to really stop and think about what are the paramount needs of the community right now. What does that do to current members of the community, and kind of weigh those options out. I do, and I've said it many, many times, I truly fear that if we don't get a handle on this, and if we don't act now, this community's youth will not be able to gain entry into the housing market. We need a diverse amount of housing to come to the market. You don't have to look too far to notice that businesses are shutting down 1 or 2 days a week because they can't staff. And so allowing additional rental units, additional entry-level housing is going to be one piece to the puzzle to help solve that issue. So this is a satellite image. This is the site here. As I noted, there's the structure sitting right up on that lot line. This is Avery Estates to the north. The owner of this property actually was one of the developers of Avery Estates. This is a street view of the current structure. As you can see, unpaved, kind of beat up driveway. The structure itself is about at its useful life. And this is an example of what Chris has done to the north, and this is going to be the model, albeit we do have a slightly more narrow lot to the south. We've measured it out. We've got some exhibits that we believe will work on that site. But again, part of the request has to do with the fact that that site is very narrow. It does not have a lot of government way frontage. Frontage, exposure, pivotal to retail uses, to most commercial uses. And Chris's goal would be to produce a product very similar to the south as what he did at Avery Estates here to the north. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who is tuning in online for a few minutes to discuss his vision for this site and his ties to the community and how he sees responsibly redeveloping this parcel to the south. So Chris, if you're there.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. I'll try to make this concise. Just to clarify, because I did read, obviously, the couple of folks that wrote in about opposing this. I'm local, born and raised here. My wife moved here her family moved here 120 years ago. I'm actively involved. This is not something I'm going to sell and build and sell. I built and own Avery Estates, and I bought this commercial lot because I was concerned about what could be built today. You saw the list, and there's a much longer list of things that I really did not want right across the fence from Avery Estates. I do not own the townhomes in the corner there, the lower right-hand corner of the southeast, but I own the other 55. Built and own those. These are not apartments. One thing, Jeremy used the word apartments, and I kind of pride myself on the fact that these are townhomes. Nobody lives above or below you. You have your own front door at street level, and they're two-story townhomes. And they are highly desirable, 100% occupied all the time, and very nice little community that is something I would be happy to live in. It's a great place that is not your typical apartment building, just for what it's worth. Anyway, I agree that high density is not what I'm looking for. What I consider to be high density, if you were to look at a picture of the space around each of these, it's a very comfortable setting, and also just obviously right now it's just a big field with minimal impact tax-wise on the city, but. I was recently, if you see that property just to the south, that commercial property immediately adjacent to the back lot that I own, that owner approached me asking if he could buy that back lot that backs up to those dozen townhomes that I don't own. He wanted to buy that and park his heavy equipment there. He's in the bridge building business. He has diesel trucks and steel and all kinds of heavy equipment that he wanted to use that as his yard. It's a guy I've known for 20 years, but I didn't sell it to him because that's not what I want as the neighbor across the back fence, but it is what would be allowed in that space. That's one of many uses that would be allowed that I don't think would make a great neighbor. And that's why I bought this. I bought this property from a guy that I've known for 50 years, and I bought it because I wanted to protect the neighborhood, if you will, that I've helped to build. So happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to clarify what it is that is my intent, and that I'm actually in some ways I would say requesting a more desirable zoning for the area rather than a less desirable or more dense.
Thank you, Chris, for the clarification. Yeah, so a very similar product to the north, to the south. We're going to have to make some amendments just based on the narrowness of the lot, but we have some exhibits going around. We believe it's easily attainable to the south and allow everybody to have some privacy and to have a nice place to live. And to kind of bookend the whole thing, I really think that, well, I strongly believe, and I know that most of our community understands that we are in a housing crisis right now. It's not, you can't sugarcoat it. We are in a housing crisis. If we continue to deny requests like this, if we continue to deny every request that isn't for a single family home on a quarter-acre lot, we're going to continue to price our service-based people right out of this market. And it seems like the right move right now because a lot of these people are transplants, and we all have the same fear that people are going to move here and bring their politics with them. I'm with everybody in this room that is in opposition to the growth, but I really don't see any evidence to support the idea that the people are going to want to stop moving here. They're coming with realized equity, where they're selling out from. They're outbidding local people onto the market. It is a conundrum. I don't think anybody can sit here and say they have the solution to it. I know we don't, but we have to have an open and honest discussion about the fact that housing is going to be critical. And if we continue down a path of denying requests like this, our workforce is going to go elsewhere because they're not going to be able to afford to live here. Our service-based industry providers, they're going to go elsewhere. Our school teachers, our nurses, we're moving into that category. And I just wanted to close my presentation tonight with something that I read out of the Coeur d'Alene Press a week or two ago. It was an editorial submitted, and I just want to read the last few sentences because I felt it was very on point to this discussion. And the author, who wasn't identified on the online version, states that change is only going to occur in an increasingly effective level if more people become involved, and that goes beyond brainstorming and perhaps even some personal sacrifice. A change in attitude among many who already live here is essential. Until we develop an understanding that hardworking people who reside in apartments or mobile homes are neither inferior nor unwanted, we'll have a housing problem exacerbated and perpetuated by moral corruption. If that sounds harsh, so be it. This outright discrimination against those who can't afford a $500,000 roof over their heads is abhorrent, and it flies in the face of Idaho values. In the weeks ahead, specific and practical workforce housing projects will be brought to the community's attention. We encourage citizens to scrutinize them rationally and with a little compassion. And with that, does anybody have any questions?
Fire away, guys. No questions?
No question.
I guess we have no questions.
Thank you, everyone.
And so now that you have an idea of the applicant's reasons for the request, I'm going to go into the standards of approval and be able to answer questions, including about the future land use map. I'll go into that as well. It is important to note that these standards of approval, which are from code, are going to be the basis for your deliberations. You're familiar with them, but for the benefit of the public, I'll go over each one. First is whether or not there is a need for additional studies or plans to evaluate the proposal. And while additional analysis could certainly come at a future stage if the zone map amendment were granted, things like a trip generation letter, staff did not believe that additional studies were necessary at this time. One of the reasons for that is we don't have a site plan. We don't have a specific proposal. The applicant stated in the narrative that in their packet that they want to see the outcome of this and will design accordingly. It sounds like they are designing and kind of playing around with what could be done on the site based on the dimensions. But that would be evaluated according to the commercial site plans. The other thing that is important is public health, safety, and general welfare. That is largely subjective, but it also is crucial because community needs are varied, and the comprehensive plan, which I'll get to in a minute here, discusses various policies that relate to health, safety, and general welfare. The applicant has explained why they believe the proposal is consistent with health, safety, and general welfare, as well as consistent with the comprehensive plan. As we shift gears to the comprehensive plan, it's important to note that this future land use map that you're looking at is just one component. There are also goals and policies, which are in the staff report, and I'll pull up for the public's benefit here. But the purple that you see is mixed use. So this parcel is designated as mixed use on the comprehensive plan. Some considerations for that, the applicant got to a few of them in their presentation, but one is that the commercial zone used to allow for residential with a special use permit, and that is no longer permissible. The mixed use zone was adopted and is part of zoning code, although in order to achieve that mixed use zoning designation, this is the request process that has to occur. But that zone, if this were granted, would be subject to design standards that were passed through an ordinance. Importantly, 12 to 15 dwelling units per acre is the threshold for development in that zone. The applicant has expressed an intent to develop the western portion of the parcel with a commercial use fronting Government Way and some residential units in the rear, although, as I mentioned, we don't know exactly what that would look like. The comprehensive plan specifies goals. These are some that could potentially be relevant to your decision. That's up to you to discuss and decide. And they are in the staff report. I won't go into detail on any one of them unless you have questions, but they are also accompanied by policies that are linked to certain goals in the comprehensive plan related to largely health, safety, and general welfare, approaching that from different angles, whether it's development density along transportation corridors, or making sure that utilities are adequate for a given development. Those are the sorts of things that these goals and policies consider. And so finally, this is one that the applicant went into some detail on, making sure that the request is consistent with the zone district's purpose and intent. And so commercial, there was a change to that. I mentioned that a few slides ago. And now it's meant for non-residential uses. There are really no exceptions other than the caretaker's residence, which could be permitted through a CUP, but that wouldn't allow for multiple units on a property, while the mixed-use zone provides for both residential and commercial. You could have just commercial, you could have just residential, or you could have a mixture of both, which is the applicant's intent. Infrastructure is an important consideration. A lot of those goals and policies relate to this. It's going to need to be served by water, sewer, and of course, appropriate access that accounts for fire district emergency response. And those are going to be factors that are considered at time of site design. And this would be true regardless of whether the zone map amendment were granted. If it was a commercial property and they came in with a development request, we would look for things like access, landscaping, lighting, parking, all of those considerations. Same with a mixed use site plan. Those considerations would be the same. Now, it is important to note that if you have multiple residential uses on site, that would determine the type of access that could be permissible. And that would be evaluated by staff, including the city engineer, if we were to have a proposal in front of us. But the parcel has approximately 90 feet of frontage, and so that would be a limiting factor that would have to be taken into account. We did provide notice to 17 different agencies, and the ones that responded to us are on the screen here. All of them had no comment except for Northern Lakes Fire Protection District, which expressed that they did approve of this and provided some general standards that are typical of their response that would need to be met at time of future development. And as for public comment, we noticed 39 adjacent property owners via the mail, and we also posted it online, published it in the Coeur d'Alene Press, and posted a sign on site. And we received 2 comments in opposition to the development. The applicant spoke to some of those. The concerns were largely related to high density of housing, and those comments are in your memos. This is just another view of the property. This is from Google, and you'll note the frontage on Government Way, which is narrow, and that is pictured here. This is the existing house, and the applicant already showed you a close-up of what that house looks like. This is the frontage length. This is the existing approach, and there would be a single approach that would have to serve the property, both any commercial business that was adjacent to the Government Way and any residential in the rear. And so meeting setback requirements from the north and south property lines, meeting the minimum width standard for access, as well as landscape buffers that would be required, that would all have to be incorporated into a future site plan. And it would largely depend on the density proposed. And so those are the standards that you'll have to evaluate. These are those standards copied again on one screen, and I can come back to these. But before you is this request, and you're able to approve that. You'll approve with conditions if you felt that was appropriate, or deny the request. Of course, you're recommending this to the City Council. The next step upon your recommendation would be that the City Council considers this request and makes a decision based on that. And I stand for any questions that you have at this time.
I don't have any.
Anybody have any questions?
I think I have mine answered on the land use map, so.
I think you answered them.
Okay.
Is the public allowed a question?
We're gonna have we'll have a public,
It's just a clarification.
Public cannot ask questions of staff, no.
Okay.
Fonda, as far as allowed uses and giving a conditional approval I assume you'll advise us if anything we're discussing could put the city at liability. Like, for example, we said yes, but no apartments, for example, or no apartment buildings. I assume you would jump in and let us know.
Yeah, if you start discussing any
When we deliberate.
conditions during deliberation, yes,
Yep, and that's at the big if, obviously.
absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you. I'll just leave it on the aerial for public comment.
All right, so we ready to fly into public testimony? Anyone who wants to offer comments regarding the subject case, please submit a completed form located on the table by the entrance doors. The form must have your name, address, date, and whether you want to testify in support of, opposed to, or are neutral. Anyone planning to speak must do so at the podium so your remarks can be heard in the recording system. All questions and comments will be directed to the commission, that's us, not the applicant. The applicant will have the opportunity to answer questions and offer rebuttal after all public testimony is completed. All speakers will need to state their name and address for the record before they begin speaking. I will call first those supporting the application, then those uncommitted, and finally those opposed to the application. Do we have anything?
I don't have anything up here.
You guys need a few minutes to submit?
Where does this go?
Right up here, please.
I'm sorry.
This the one and only? We got one more coming.
I think you might have one
She's
more.
writing.
Okay. No, let's wait. We have to do them in order. Thank you, though. There's one other chocolate. There's leftovers. There's leftovers. You want another one? Pass it down. You guys are worth it.
You guys are killing me. You guys are killing me.
We don't get paid, so this is.
I know.
Are we waiting for another,
Yes.
on this one? Oh, next one.
Oh, thanks. I thought we were waiting. I apologize. All right, so we have one person that wishes to offer public testimony. She is neutral. And I apologize. Is it Linda Putz? Putz?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just had one question.
Can you state your name and your address first?
Linda Putz, 4529 East Cattail Court in Hayden. And my question is, I'm confused, was it apartments for rent or townhomes for sale?
This is just a zone map amendment request.
Yep. So all we're doing today, right now, the land is zoned for commercial uses, and the applicant has asked us to change that zone such that they could potentially put some commercial in there and/or a mix of residential. The exact plan would be in a different step from this process.
Okay. So when one presentation led the belief to be apartments, the other part of the presentation meant it townhomes.
Understand?
So just curious.
Sometimes it's to their advantage to tell us what they want to do so that it helps, but it really has not too much bearing on what we're trying to decide today.
Okay. Just curious. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, if we don't have any more, I guess we'll close the public hearing. Applicant, you can offer a rebuttal if you so desire. Rebuttal, of course, has to be limited to anything that's brought up during the public hearing.
I think I'm good. None here.
All right, thank you. He said he's good. All right, so the hearing's now closed. No more questions or comments will be allowed from the public. And so to the commission, do we wish to proceed or schedule deliberations for another day?
Oh, we can proceed.
Proceed, everybody's comfortable?
Yeah.
All right, let me know your thoughts, people.
We can start with.
I don't care, Mary Lee can start.
I think that to rezone this as a mixed use increases the
desirable possibilities along government. And so that's kind of how I feel about it.
Okay. Can we get the four
Yes.
standards of approval up? That way, as we're discussing these, we can show that we've addressed those
Yeah.
specifically.
Anything more? Oh, okay.
No,
I agree. I mean, I do agree with Mary that it kind of gives the developer a little bit bigger palette as far as options with this piece of property. There's definitely a need for some lower cost housing in the area, particularly for people that aren't particularly higher income earners based off what I'm seeing. I also agree that anything is going to be a aesthetic improvement over what's currently there. So I think based off I agree, it meets the four standards for approval.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chair, sir?
I think it meets the standards of approval. I think this is actually something that the mixed-use zone was designed for. That type of lot. The developer stated that he plans on doing townhomes, which I think also fits in kind of that missing middle that we've talked about so much in so many of our meetings regarding this zone. And I may have some ideas on if we get in, if there's a motion made, but that's my, just.
Okay.
I think that the four criteria are probably a good match. I think that improvement aesthetically to the area is nice. I think that because it backs up to a similar property, that if the same or similar type of housing construction, I don't know if we can make a request or a condition on that, but
We can make a request to approve with conditions.
Yeah, I would like to see it remain consistent with the same that's been done. I understand they have some dimensional obstacles, but maybe we could talk about that later, I don't know, but.
No, this would be the time to chat, like if you wanted to say, limit to two-story townhomes or something like that. Again, as long as legal counsel, doesn't tell us that we're.
So I'm kind of new, so call fouls if, but I'd like to not see high density, medium density maybe, is what it seems is just to the north. And so if it were something similar to that, I think that would be a good fit for that particular piece of property.
Okay. I think we could probably, if we wanted to, and such a proposal was made, or I'm sorry, I always mess that word up, no, not a condition. Anyway, if a conditional, of approval was made, we could say that it matches the character of the adjacent property.
You could. I think this is one of those unique parcels that falls within those gap parcels that we've talked about before, where you'll want to be careful. They had an allowance under the commercial zone previous to the zone text amendment of a density allowance. So you'll want to be careful not to provide additional restrictions beyond what they previously had.
Okay. So my thoughts on this, it does meet the four standards of approval. The one thing that we're noting, even though we're talking about townhomes, is that the developer still could do something commercial there. So as far as the zone map amendment goes, I think it's consistent with what what we're trying to go towards. But until we see the actual site development, there's no silver bullet being fired by the developer. Motion, that's the word I wanted to go. So if somebody wants to.
I have one other question for you. So if they're asking for the zone amendment, can we then not restrict the amount that they put on there because they're asking for it as opposed to we're telling them they have to be zoned that way? Does that make sense? In the sense of a taking?
So this is one of those, and I think Zach hit it nicely in his presentation where he talked about it's zoned commercial, and previous to the rezoning and the zone text amendment to change the zones within the city, this commercial parcel would have been allowed to have multifamily, we don't call it that anymore, but multifamily with a conditional use permit on that parcel and would have had a density, and Donna, step in if I say this wrong, a density maximum. And so because they're asking for a zone map amendment to get back what had been taken from them essentially in the zone text change, you just, as you discuss any limitations, just be mindful of that.
All right, so we can entertain a motion if we so desire, or continue deliberations.
I have one more.
Yes, sir?
Can we put a restriction that the townhomes or apartments can only be available for purchase and not rent?
No.
Just try.
Gotta ask.
Could we put a
Fair
condition
question.
on that forbids the developer from developing apartments specifically?
No.
Or must be
What's allowed
townhomes
in the-
specifically?
Well, not, well, I don't want to,
Yeah, what's allowed all in.
townhomes, cottages, something other than, an apartment complex.
Well, you have height restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have townhomes and cottages. I mean, you can't have townhomes of 3 units or less in the mixed-use zone. You can only have fourplexes or more.
But you have height restrictions.
Yeah, we have height restrictions. You've got a really narrow lot. Zach did a good job when he presented and said that depending on the circulation of getting back there, you could have a circulation aisle that's 24 feet wide. Keep that in mind, 90 minus 24. Or you could have a private street that's 90 minus 28. Or you could have a public street that's 90 minus whatever the heck he says up there.
You still have setback.
Right, and then you have setbacks. So these get to be really narrow, maybe lengthwise, this way, not this way. And you get 3 stories, 3 stories, whatever that height is. 3 stories in mixed use. I had to think about it a minute. Stop, pause, It really gets you more of a vertical conversation than here. In order to make any of that work, that's just circulation. That's, you got 2 parking spaces for every dwelling unit, all the design standards in the mixed-use designs, if you incorporate residential multifamily that the planning and zoning and city council approves. So they have lots of design standards to meet that will help
And it would definitely,
potentially dictate how much they could fit on here.
all right, so it'd probably be overkill for us to have to specify that, because in order for them to meet all the design criteria, they're going to probably be very limited to what could be built there residentially.
I think if you did apartments on top of apartments, they'd have to be really wide.
Right, okay.
If I may clarify also, this is maybe not an ideal view, but I'll describe it here. This is just the table of allowed uses, since we're talking about various types of residential development. And MU here, mixed use, you can see that 4 or more family dwellings, condominiums, and apartments are allowed. However, the code does not allow for 0 lot line developments like townhome apartments on, with single ownership. So it would be restricted based on this. Now, of course, this allowance here for these 3 types, there are multiple configurations and designs that one could think of, but you couldn't have this style of development, which I hear being discussed. The other thing that is worth mentioning when we're talking about comparisons to the north is the difference in width here. It wouldn't be able to take this same format as footprint, because you can see the minimum width to even serve this is significantly larger or longer than they have available. So they'd have to figure out some sort of circulation that serviced the dwelling units adequately, and it would either have to be very narrow units, or it would have to be some configuration where the units are set back somehow from the access. But you have to have the minimum parking per dwelling unit. So the site is very self-limiting in that respect. I just wanted to clarify the use, and then I also have this table that shows the setbacks depending on the type of use. So the other thing worth noting, since we've talked about multifamily, we've talked about commercial, there are similar setbacks for front, side, and rear, and flanking, regardless of which types of uses. There is a max lot coverage that takes into account, or that comes into consideration when you're talking just multifamily. There's a 70% max lot coverage, and I brought that up only because of the small site. That may actually be a limiting factor. While if you have a mixture of commercial and multifamily or commercial, you don't have that same restriction. So it's just another thing to consider.
Thank you, Zach. And I'm not necessarily weighing towards any kind of restrictions. I just wanted to do our due diligence and ask the right questions before we have a motion, if we do have a motion.
I have one other question for Zach. So you're saying you can't have a townhome ownership in the mixed-use zone, is that correct? Is that how our code's written?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yes,
Zero lot line?
yes and no. Townhomes by our code are clarified as 3 dwelling units or less, 0 lot line construction. If you condo platted a 4-plex, you could still construct it using townhome construction, which is, so that's part of her question. Townhomes are a construction type and they're a platting type, not the same meaning. So that's part of the confusion.
So they can have townhome-style rental units,
Thank you.
separate from individually owned, separate parcel townhomes.
Correct.
But couldn't they also,
Right.
Build them look like
Yes.
townhomes, but
Yes,
it's all one.
that's the townhome
Yes,
style,
that's
yes.
okay. Correct,
Townhome style, but it's a condominium plat.
correct.
Okay.
but within that, I heard you, and I'm actually asking just for my own knowledge to keep up here with the notes. You mentioned that they could have those rental units, but they could also own the units
They could.
under the condominium plat.
They could.
It's,
Absolutely
so it would
correct.
appear to be townhomes, even though it would be through a different mechanism. And that condominium plat process, worth noting, is a process where we have to go through a set of standards of approval, an evaluation process, notice the agencies. So that's a whole separate process that would need to occur if they wanted to do that.
Thank you, Zach. Anybody want to make a motion? Want the number here?
PZ 21-024 1000 Hill Zone Map Amendment. I make a motion that we approve the zone map amendment.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
That you make a recommendation to council to approve the zone map amendment.
Make a recommendation to council to approve the zone map amendment.
That's the so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Okay. Commissioner Gibson,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Okay, next order of business is a public hearing for PZE-21-0264. We're going to open the public hearing for this.
Well, I'll introduce it, but before we go anywhere with this one, I do have handouts for the commissioners. And what these are public comments that were submitted in the record after the memo that you received. So these came in too late to come to you in that memo, so I want to make sure that each of you have a copy of them. So I'm going to hand those out real quick here. Thank you, and I wanted to do it on record just so everyone knows what I'm doing.
Ellen?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's take 5. We'll resume at 6:06, please. Okay, Zach, we're ready when you are, sir.
Okay. I'll give everyone just a minute here to come back, and I'll ready also.
Drop the gavel on him.
All right, well, this is our second item here, and I'm glad that you had maybe a few minutes to read those comments that came in. Some of them were today. I actually have one here that I'll have to read that came in during our workshop, so kind of late-breaking items here. But this is a zone map amendment request. The important thing to note about this parcel right off the bat is that it's a split zone parcel. It has two zoning designations. I'll show you a map in a second, but this is a request for half of the parcel to change the zone to match the other half. So it's a split zone parcel, and the current parcel was created in 2017 through a boundary line adjustment. It's an administrative process where agencies are consulted, and they adjusted the boundary line slightly in this case to result in the current parcel configuration. And then in 2018, the current owner acquired this property. As mentioned in the last item, but just for the sake of any new members of the public, mentioning again, in May 2021, the city had anticipated doing a citywide zone map amendment in accordance with what was then the recently adopted future land use map, and that didn't end up occurring. And so this property owner came forward with this request in December after that was canceled. Because we're dealing with the residential multifamily zone, the other element that's important to bring up here is that that zone is treated in code by an ordinance that is due to expire in September. It was adopted as an interim chapter so that a solution could be found in that span of a year. It was adopted in September, it expires in September. And so that's maybe a relevant factor to just be aware of as we go through this request. The parcel is a little over 2.5 acres, and it does have a single-family residence and accessory building. The single-family residence is located in the northern portion of the parcel that's already zoned commercial. So it's non-conforming, meaning it was established lawfully and can persist, cannot be expanded. The southern portion of the property is residential multifamily. You'll see that the parcel's along Hayden Avenue, it's along the south side, and there is no access to this parcel currently other than through Hayden Avenue. There are two approaches, and you'll see that a little clearer in the aerial. But this is an interesting corridor because you have multiple parcels to the east here that are split zone in a similar manner. Some of them are standalone parcels that are zoned residential multifamily, but you have this landlocked area of multifamily zoning that allows for uses that would not be allowed in commercial, and commercial allows for uses that wouldn't be allowed here. So these properties have this situation where they can't do one use necessarily on the entire parcel. For example, this current residence, the applicant does intend to convert that to a commercial use, but they're requesting this amendment on the southern portion to commercial in order to enable the use of the entire parcel as a commercial facility. And so you have adjacent zoning to the south of R1, and this is a platted subdivision here. Broadmoor is the name of the subdivision, and then you have some light industrial areas in the vicinity, not adjacent to the parcel. And then along Hayden Avenue, you have a mixture of light industrial, commercial, and non-conforming residential uses. So that's the context of the vicinity.
Zach, a couple questions on the previous slide.
Yes.
The properties to the west, with the exception of the one that's one big plot, how long have those been commercial?
I don't know the date on all of these, but I do know that this property here, this is actually subject to a zoning development agreement that limits the use of that site to certain light manufacturing uses. I believe that was in, I don't know the
Ballpark's
exact year,
fine.
maybe 2005, but
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, that's my point. It wasn't last year or anything.
no,
like
no,
that.
it was not recent.
All right, and to the east, the four areas of land there, those are obviously, whatever they're zoned, they're not developed at all.
Right, immediately to the east, the parcel, and maybe the aerial will show a little better. This is undeveloped. There is a development here. And as you note, by comparing that to the zoning map, it's actually in the residential portion of the parcel. But this is not recent, although there was, I believe, a similar request when this zoning development agreement was adopted. And I would have to check the year on that. I don't know that I have that year in my, yeah, I don't have the year of that zoning development agreement, but at the time, it was a similar situation as a split zone parcel, and then that zoning development agreement was found to be appropriate at the time. It limits the site to light manufacturing, and so it can't just be used for any commercial use. The other commercial properties are not subject to that similar type of restriction. Does that help answer the question? I know I don't have the exact year on it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the applicant is here to present. The applicant is represented by Longwell and Trapp Architects. Corey Trapp, I believe, is here, and the owner is Don Taylor. They both may share the time, and I'm going to hand it over to them at this time. Would you like me to keep this slide up? Is that going to work for you? Okay.
Good evening. Corey Trapp, Longwell Trapp Architects.
Apologize, Corey, just real quick. Has anybody on the commission had any ex parte communication with the applicant or the general public regarding this case?
No.
No. I forgot that last time, sorry. All right, thank you.
Okay. Corey Trapp, Longwell Trapp Architects, 8677 North Wayne Drive. Don Taylor's also here. He can answer any questions when we get to that portion of the presentation if you have anything for him. As Zach stated, Mr. Taylor purchased the property about 3.5 years ago. It was conveyed to him at the time that the entire parcel was commercial by the real estate sales. He did not check with the city to verify that, took it upon their word that it was all commercial. Purchased it with the intent that he would put a business on the site and use the entire site. About a year ago, we were contacted along with the contractor about building a building on the back portion of the property to store some vehicles and things in. At that time, this is when you discovered that the parcel was not all commercial. So now we're going through that process. We'd like to request that the entire parcel be made commercial. The future land zoning for this parcel and that whole area indicates that the intent is to make all of those parcels commercial in the future. We think it's the best use for the property. The single-family residence is being currently used as an office space. The tenant has been moved out in September. We just think that it's a really good use for this property, and we'll follow all the development guidelines that are required for commercial zoning, for buffer yards and all those kind of things in development. We haven't fully come up with a plan yet for what's going to happen back there. Part of it depends on being zoned commercial. So, with that, I guess, pretty simple, straightforward. I would open it up to any questions that you might have.
Keith, any questions?
I guess I have a lot of thoughts on it.
Okay.
Can we start at the other end and?
Sure.
Yeah.
Questions
Oh,
for the
we're already
applicant?
ready for that?
No, you haven't had your public hearing yet. You're just doing questions.
Yeah, this is just questions to the applicant.
Yeah,
So we
I
have
don't
not
have any
deliberations yet.
Okay. So,
Just if there's anything you want him to clarify.
you said you don't know what you're gonna do with it.
Well, he wants to run his tree service business on the property and develop some storage buildings, but we haven't designed it all out yet.
Got it. Do you know what's the business that's adjacent to it, to the west?
To the west, isn't that Idaho, or American Fence, or?
No, it's a company that supplies dock building companies. To the north, it is a fence company, there's a slight driveway that goes back and it opens up, and they have just a big facility that they have semi-trucks daily deliver massive amounts of material to build docks, and then they distribute it to the companies that build the docks. So it's just semi-trucks all day out of there.
Do we need Dawn to come up and,
Next time I'll fuss about that.
okay.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? I have none. Thank you.
I was searching to see if I had the year on that to no avail, but as we go through the standards of approval, and we'll get to agency comments and public comments as well. I think the important thing that I would say is if you have any questions about the residential multifamily ordinance and that process, just let me know. You may be fully familiar with that, but that's kind of an interesting aspect of this. As far as the standards of approval, I'll go through them for the benefit of the public that may not have been here for the previous item. First and foremost, making sure that in your recommendation, you can decide whether or not you feel it's appropriate to require additional studies or plans to determine whether this is an advisable proposal. And staff does not believe that that would be necessary, mainly because if this were rezoned, they would have to come in with a commercial site plan application and address things such as parking, landscaping, lighting, all of the considerations that would be standard to a commercial site plan and a development of that nature. In this case, there is a specific intent, as was stated, to operate a tree service business and build an additional building in the southern portion of the parcel. But there has been no site plan provided. In fact, the other thing worth noting is the initial narrative didn't indicate a specific use. During the process, a revised narrative was submitted. That is available in your memos. It was available online as well for you to go over, elaborating on what the intent was with this parcel. The second standard relates to public health, safety, and general welfare. And you can decide what that means in this case. I would encourage you to deliberate on that. But the applicant has stated how they believe this is consistent in their narrative and discussed it verbally as well with the surrounding area, as well as with the comprehensive plan, which I'll get to when I touch the third standard of approval here. The comprehensive plan designates this parcel as commercial. It shows residential a little bit, but that's actually just an error. This is actually all commercial on the comprehensive plan future land use map. And that's true for the parcels north of Broadmoor Estates. So all along Hayden Avenue corridor, east and west, it's commercial according to that future land use map. And just some context here, especially for the benefit of the public, the future land use map is from the comprehensive plan. It's the vision of land use, but it's not current zoning. This process, this zone map amendment process, is necessary to get any sort of zoning that conforms with the future land use map. And so the goals and policies are an additional element of the comprehensive plan to consider. Future land use map is just one. And these things that are considered within these goals are relevant to public health, safety, general welfare. I'm not going to go into any one of these in detail, but I am happy to go into any one of them if you have questions. But these are some goals that may be relevant to this proposal, and I would encourage you to consider them in making your decision, whether to recommend approval or denial. They relate to things like the surrounding neighborhood, making sure that the proposed use is consistent. It considers things like major transportation corridors and whether or not there's adequate infrastructure, public facilities to serve a proposed use, and a variety of other considerations. Those goals are accompanied by policies in the comprehensive plan that relate to the goals and are a little bit more specific on how those goals may be achieved, relating to the same considerations. A wide range of factors that may go into play in a given site. As already mentioned, if this site were to be developed, there would have to be attention given to certain mitigating map measures and site elements, especially considering that, going back to the zone map, you are adjacent to R1 zoning. One important aspect of that is if this were rezoned commercial in the southern portion, there would be a requirement for a landscape buffer on the southern edge of the property to try to mitigate some of that, the adjacent uses. You have the single-family residential, you'd have a commercial parcel there if this were granted, and there would be an intent to try to obscure a little bit of that visually and noise.
Just for size-wise, that's a landscape buffer immediately to the west, isn't it?
Yes, actually, if I go back to the aerial, it may be a little clearer. There is a buffer. You can see the pavement does not go all the way to the south, nor do the buildings. Just currently in our code, we would call it a type 1 landscape buffer, and it's typically 20 feet. It can be reduced to 10 if there's adequate fencing to basically make sure that it fulfills the same purpose regardless of that width. And they would have to show on a site plan that the trees and the plants that are proposed are adequate to fulfill the purpose of that buffering, which is, again, to take the two uses that are distinct from each other and make sure there's somewhat of a barrier in between. And then the other consideration, that's not the only thing that would need to be done. There would have to be evidence that the proposed lighting was not going to create glare and shine onto this adjacent residences. And I'm just kind of going over what would have to occur before anything could be established. If that applicant wanted to build the building that they described, that would be the next step if this were to be granted. And additionally, it would have to be shown that the use that's proposed conforms with the commercial zone. There are certain things that may not be allowed in the commercial zone, but are allowed in the light industrial zone and vice versa. And sometimes there could be ambiguity there. So it would be important for them to propose a use that clearly is allowed in the commercial zone. And this fourth standard of approval gets to that a little bit. It makes sure that the proposal is consistent with the zone district's purpose and intent. The commercial zone today does not allow for any residential use, save for like a caretaker's residence through conditional use permit approval if someone wanted to, say, live on site with a business. But it used to allow for residential uses with a conditional use permit prior to the Title 11 code amendments that occurred in early 2021. And so that's a notable change. And then we've already discussed the residential multifamily and how that is expiring in September. And so what will have to happen is Planning Commission and Council will have to decide a solution for what comes next if this residential multifamily zone goes away. So that's going to be a consideration regardless of whether this zone map amendment is granted. There will likely be a change based on that at some point in the future.
And that was my next question. If this is denied and it remains RMF, which is going to expire in September, what happens in September?
What would it,
to be determined?
Yeah, to be determined, but what would happen would be the same that would happen on the other residential multifamily parcels throughout the city. If I go to the zone map, just for a little more context here, the zone map as a whole, zooming in a little bit, you can see the brown areas are all residential multifamily, and those areas, you know, a lot of them are along Hayden Avenue corridor, adjacent to the commercial, north and south along East 95, kind of a buffer zone between R1 and commercial. They would all have to be addressed in that discussion. So it's kind of a to be determined process that this would definitely be subject to if this were not granted. So I can't predict what that might be because that would take a few workshops and discussion with council.
Zach?
Yes.
Can you tell me where this property is located in comparison to the airport runway zone?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not in the runway protection zone, but it is, you can actually see this outline here a little bit on this map here. This is, well, it's a little hard to see. But if you follow my mouse, this is like the inner critical zone. This property is located in that area. The runway protection zone is just a small area adjacent to the runway. There are some properties that are in that zone. But what would likely have to occur, and let me actually get to this as far as the slide, because it's the next one, I believe, is the Coeur d'Alene Airport has requested an navigation easement over this parcel. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. The Coeur d'Alene Airport has requested an navigation easement, which is something that is pretty standard for parcels near the airport, where basically any property owner is notified and aware of its proximity and the impacts that might occur based on that, noise, other considerations. So that would be one thing that the applicant would need to provide as part of this based on the Coeur d'Alene Airport's response to agency comment. Is that?
I think that my question was about the fact that in the future land use map, that areas that were in the airport critical zones were identified as not being conducive to multifamily densities, is where I was going with that.
Good point, and thank you. That is another consideration, is you can see that there is some area along Hayden Avenue, south of this, this commercial designation, right where my mouse is, that would fall into that category. And that's just because, you have planes landing and taking off in that area. And so there's a chance for noise. That's why a lot of this zoning here, well, this is the zoning map, but if I go to the future land use map, that's why a lot of this is designated as light industrial going forward. You do have some residential down here further away, but a lot of this adjacent is light industrial because of that impact that could occur due to its proximity to the Coeur d'Alene Airport. And as you can see, this whole corridor along Hayden is commercial, whereas you have some to the east here that is mixed use. That purple is mixed use south of Hayden Avenue. So that may be some of the reason for the difference in commercial and mixed use, is because of its location relative to the airport. And that was the process that occurred in 2020, in 2021 in advance of this request to change this future land use map accordingly. And so,
Zach, are you aware why the applicant didn't ask for mixed use?
well, I can't speak to whether they did or did not. I don't know.
Okay.
I suspect that reason is why, that Donna mentioned, is why it wasn't designated as mixed use, is due to its proximity, but I don't know what the applicant asked.
Thank you.
I can add to that just for clarification also, even if the applicant had come forward today with a request for a multifamily project under the current code, the interim code that's in place, at the time of application, ITD and the FAA would have weighed in on density, height, all of the land use abilities within the inner critical zone, and would have likely made a recommendation to not allow high dense residential units within that inner critical zone.
Thank you.
It's a very good consideration. Thank you. And the other important consideration here is that unless there were some easement, going back to the aerial here, unless there were some easement arrangement made with another property owner, there really isn't access to this portion of the parcel other than through the commercial portion. You couldn't access from the south, that's all developed and there's fencing. And so right now it's basically a landlocked portion of residential multifamily. Infrastructure is also notable in the sense that there is no sewer available. I can show the sewer map if that would help, but along Hayden Avenue in this portion, there's not currently a sewer line, and it would be some time, according to our sewer plan, before sewer were installed in this location. So any future development would need to take that into account. So that's a limiting factor. Access and other considerations would be evaluated at time of site plan proposal. Because we don't have one in hand, we're not really there yet. But we did notice 17 agencies. As mentioned, we already discussed the Coeur d'Alene Airport. We didn't get really a response from any other agency besides DEQ. They had no comment. In Northern Lakes Fire Protection District, they did provide an expression of approval and then specified some general development standards that would have to be met really regardless of whether or not this zone map amendment was granted, basically pertaining to emergency access. And then we noticed 34 adjacent property owners by mail. We also posted a notice online and posted the site physically and in the Coeur d'Alene Press. And we received public comments. This count is actually updated as of 3:57 p.m. We received three in support and then 4 opposed. And I am going to read one into the record because it was printed off and handed to me prior to this meeting, and so I didn't have a chance to print it off for each of you. So this was received today at 3:57. I live in Broadmoor Estates, and I was planning on, and it's from Nick Mahan. It doesn't give an address or other contact. Actually, 9009 North Tory Lane. I live in Broadmoor Estates, and I was planning on coming to the hearing tonight to oppose this plan, as I don't want more tree removal services in my backyard. Already have to deal with them not adhering to the noise time ordinances, and have lost a really nice and expensive tree this year, as they are bringing rotten, disease-infested trees to the lot and resting them against my backyard fence. I have been positive with COVID since Friday and cannot attend due to being contagious. And so that was the only comment that is not in your packet. And so those are the comments that we received out of the people that we noticed. And this is just some aerial imagery of the neighborhood from Google. And then from the street here from Hayden Avenue, this is the view of the property today. As was mentioned, it sounds like the single family residence was vacated and is currently being used as an office, and the applicant would establish the tree service business on the entire parcel if this were to be approved. Likely, the other thing to consider, just given that that would come forward as a commercial site plan, is it would likely have to come down to a single approach, although that would be determined by the city engineer at the time. But that's pretty standard for commercial site plans. These are the standards of approval that we've reviewed. I can pull them back up for deliberations. Just wanted to recap those here directly from the code. And then you have the opportunity to recommend either approval with conditions, or denial of this request to the city council. And I stand for any questions that you have.
I have a question, Zach. So at what point do the landscape requirements fall into place? When the zoning is changed, or when they actually do development, as in such as they build a building or something else? With a tree service, them using it doesn't really require buildings and that kind of stuff that we would see normally, where the design standards and whatnot would apply as soon as that was done. So how would that look in this case?
It's a very good question. So it would not be spurred upon rezoning. It would be spurred based on the change of use. So what we have in our code, and this is just kind of pulling out what we would look at if we were evaluating this at the time, is site improvements table based on what is being proposed. So if there's a change of use of the site, say the commercial business is proposed, then there would be a requirement for site improvements pursuant to our code. We do have kind of a gradation that could determine the extent of those improvements. For example, if you have just like a resurfacing of a gravel area on a site, it doesn't need to meet the full scope of standards. But really, whenever you're changing the use, as would be occurring in this case, because right now it's a residence used for an office, and what they want to do is bring in a new business, that would spur site plan requirements. And so we would need to go through the process. The other thing that's worth noting is a commercial addition and change of use, that category spurs the construction of frontage improvements and the dedication of right-of-way in accordance with the transportation plan. And so that would be evaluated at the time. It is possible to enter into a deferred improvement agreement in general. I don't want to comment on whether or not that would be the solution in this case. That would be a decision that would be made largely by the city engineer based on the transportation plan. But we don't have sidewalks today, as you saw in that picture. There would need to be swales and curb and gutter, and then frontage buffer that are typical frontage improvements, and that is spurred whenever there's a change of use. So it's upon the change of use that we would require that site plan application, not upon rezoning. I hope that.
So the tree service is not using this property at this time?
They may be. I don't know if the office is for the tree service.
What's the back portion that we need to actually change the zone for? What's physically back there right now?
I believe they're using it for storage. I haven't been out on the site, but I have heard from the public comments, which I'll get to in a minute here, elaborating on some of that there is concern about noise, about piles of materials and other what are alleged nuisances on the site. And they may be nuisances, they may not be. I haven't been out on the site to confirm that. However, we do have standards that must be met regarding storage of materials. For example, you can't store materials in such a way that attracts rodents. And I'm not saying or alleging that there are, but that has been stated in the public comments, and you have those in front of you. And so I just want to note that that's a concern, and it's something for you all to consider, is that whatever is going on the site today may or may not be in compliance with the current zoning. But again, there's no active code violation on this site. And in order for us to confirm that there were a violation occurring, as some of the comments have indicated, we would need to send someone out on site as a result of a formal complaint. So regardless of whether you approve the zone map amendment or not, the applicant, as with every applicant, needs to comply with underlying zoning. And that's just true regardless of the zone map amendment request. So I hope that addresses some of maybe what you're getting at. I can elaborate if.
So what I'm getting at is if the general nature of what is there right now, whether it's conforming with the current zoning or not, doesn't change, then if we change this to be all commercial, and what is happening back there doesn't change, then they wouldn't have to comply with the setbacks and the buffers and that kind of stuff?
I believe they would, and perhaps Donna can chime in here, but just my thought is that because you're changing the zoning, if there is a use that currently isn't allowed, which has been discussed as a concern, again, I'm not confirming nor denying that, I don't know, I haven't been out there, but you can see storage of materials on this aerial photo, which is approximately a year old. This is sourced from Kootenai County. They would have to comply with the buffering standards if you were to change the zone, if there was already a commercial use on site that is not in compliance with those standards. Bringing it into compliance with the current standards that would have been applicable at time of use establishment. So, and that's important because we want to make sure that any use that's brought to our attention that's occurring in a zone complies with the standards that were in place and applicable to that use when it was established. Does that cover it, Donna, or do you have?
Well, I was just going to say that, you can condition the zone map amendment on a site evaluation and then a site plan and or mitigation to bring it into conformance. If it's using, I haven't been there either, so it's important to know that. But if they're utilizing it today for part of their business, that they bring it into compliance with current commercial site plan standards. So that would be like, paving circulation ways and providing for parking and making sure their storage is meeting setbacks and putting in the landscape buffer and or fencing it if it isn't already fenced. Part of it probably is already fenced. So it just brings it up to speed. But, to be fair to the applicants that are here, it was a house that had, a bigger piece of property and they were kind of storing part of their stuff there. So they're trying to, and our code has been kind of all over the place, with their particular parcel. So they're just trying to figure out, can we make this commercial? And if we can make it commercial, then maybe it makes it viable to make it our business, rather than pouring a bunch of money and or cleanup in it, which probably they could have or should have, or maybe whatever done before. But prior than to do that, trying to figure out what their avenue is. So this is really their first step.
I think what Donna said is important. You could condition the zone map amendment on site evaluation by staff. I mean, that's really all you have to say, is that staff goes and lays eyes on the site because they're going to identify any code violations.
Okay. Yeah, because my biggest concern with that type of business, and I don't have any issue with that type of business, but that type of business that close to R1 would be, my concern would be health and safety.
Sure.
Possible fire potential, just whatever, but health and safety issues would be my only concern, so.
And that is a concern that certainly is addressed and would have to be continually addressed on site. And during the site plan process, one of the things that needs to be shown is that access is compliant with fire district standards so that there could be a response if need be. And also, material storage is subject to standards in the code that are outside of Title 11 in our Title 4, which deals with health and safety.
Okay.
And so those are relevant to bring up only because they deal with things like noise. Title 11 actually does have a vibration standard that it mentions that must be met. Just types of impacts that may be associated with the tree service business would have to be compared to these health and safety standards to ensure that it wasn't creating a nuisance as defined by code.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ben?
No.
No.
Okay. Zach, we're good.
Okay, I'll leave it on this one.
How's everybody doing for SIDS? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Want to power through?
I'm fine.
Okay. All right, so anyone who wants to offer comments regarding the subject case, please submit a completed form located on the table by the entrance doors. Form must have name, address, date, whether you want to testify in support of, opposed to, or neutral. Anyone planning to speak must do so at the podium so your remarks can be heard in the recording system. All questions and comments will be directed to the commission, not the applicant. The applicant will have the opportunity to answer questions and offer rebuttal after all public testimony is completed. All speakers will need to state their name and address for the record before they begin speaking. I will call first those supporting the application, then those uncommitted, and finally those opposed to the application. We have one person wishing to speak. And,
representing a group.
okay,
I'd like to speak for myself and support.
you're the owner, so that's passed, sorry.
Well, he's the applicant, he
Well,
can,
He can during a rebuttal.
yes,
but
he can
that's only-
rebut anything that's said
But that's
after
only a
public
rebuttal
hearing.
against anything that's been said during the testimony,
Correct.
not just in general.
Just-
Oh, okay, we have a
If I
second
might
one.
chime in just briefly, and just a procedural aspect of this, someone did submit a video and asked me to have it ready to display when they speak during their allotted time. And so whoever that is, when you're ready, just let me know. I have it pulled up.
Not here. She's actually one with COVID too.
Yeah, she stated that it was going to be during someone else's time. I don't know if you want it up.
Mine because I'm representing.
It's totally up to you, whether you want me to pull it up or not. It's there in the folder. So just as in,
Well, if you want it up, let me know, because he's going to need a minute, and that would be a good time for us to just take 3 minutes.
Sure.
All right.
Want to get it ready?
sure, yeah, you can pull it
It's
up.
on the video.
I mean,
All right,
just
so we do
depends
have
on-
one person that's,
Slide up here.
we do have one person that's going to speak ahead that's neutral, but I'm going to wait.
Okay.
So and I'll let you get set
It
up.
just takes a second, yeah.
Yep, so we'll be back in just a minute. All right, so thank you for your patience. Linda Poots again? I'm sorry, I'll get it eventually.
Oh, it's okay.
She wishes to speak, and she is neutral for this case.
This is the first time I've ever been here. I'm no nobody. Oh, I'm Linda Putz, 4529 East Cattail Court, Hayden, sorry.
You are somebody.
I'm just interested in what's going on. I don't have any opinions about anything. I'm just here listening, and then I have all these questions. So if I heard correctly, I got the impression that the owner purchased this property thinking it was already commercially zoned because the real estate agency told him it was. So now they want to change it, and it's going to affect some of the people that are living in the housing that's behind that area. So wouldn't the issue be with the real estate company who misrepresented, either real estate company misrepresented the zoning for the property, or it was incumbent upon the buyers to determine what the possibilities were for that land use and what the zoning is?
So it's a great question, but it's outside the purview of what we're doing, but go ahead.
I can answer, yeah. Yes, I'm a realtor, so I can answer that question.
I'm sorry?
I'm in real estate, so I can answer.
Oh, okay.
So first of all, yes, the realtor screwed up. I guess there's no other way to put it. They were unaware. They misrepresented the property and the zoning. So they would have some type of,
Some type of recourse. They'll have, the
Yes.
buyers will have some type of recourse.
and that would be the recourse for the buyer. The buyer, yes, they should have also checked into the zoning, but they were relying on the information given to them by the realtor, who was a professional. But in this case, however, though, they're coming to, if you look at our future land use map, it shows that entire area as being commercial. What we have here is kind of these gap parcels that are, basically they're landlocked. The only way you're gonna get residential multifamily on there is if you put a driveway back to it through the commercial side. So somebody's there trying to clean up the commercial and the miss zone that's there.
So it
That's what
sounds
they're
like it's
asking us
an
to do.
Edsel, it's really not usable, other than being put in a museum. Anyway, that was just my question. I mean, it just seems like, and I don't know what the homeowners thought it was going to be that purchased the property, in the housing development there. You know, there's stuff there, they know at some point maybe something's going to go there, maybe not. But it just seems incumbent upon the buyer to have, I think the real estate agent, that's going to be the issue, and the second responsibility is upon the buyer. But I don't know, I'm just asking. Like I said, I'm only listening. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Elena Rose DeMarco, who wishes to speak and is against the proposal.
My name's Elena Rose. I share a property boundary right here. And I'm also representing
To give her whole address.
these homes here. This person is impacted by sound. I did put the street addresses on the statement that I sent via email.
Could we get your home address for the record, please?
8995 Tory Lane.
Thank you.
Right here. So I just want to point out, because this was already mentioned, this was brought up, how this was developed. Notice that most of their activity occurs further away from where we live. And all along the process, they were in communication, they came to the meeting, they came door to door.
Can you
when I had a
speak to the
complaint-
microphone so she can pick it up at the recording? Thank you.
When anybody had a complaint, they resolved it to make sure that we had enjoyment of this area like we had. They have a wonderful buffer of landscaping that has provided a visual and sound barrier. So I have to say, what they've done has been the responsible development, the responsible stewardship of that property in a way that, to the best of their ability, it used to be a horse farm. We liked that a little better, but to the best of their ability, really kept us in mind as private property owners. So the trucks that come in and out, I'll be honest with you, there is, oh, I'm sorry. There is some sound. It's not like it used to be, obviously. We accept that. The property over that's in question now, a lot different. Where do I start? I do believe if you buy a property, you got to know the ins and outs of it. You are ultimately responsible for it. So saying you didn't know the zoning, no offense, this is not a character issue.
Keep comments
but-
to us.
Okay. But for what we've endured, I think, I don't know, I didn't know, oops, you know, it's better to say sorry later than please now. Like, that is not, I think, acceptable or responsible. So most of their, and I'm going to point now to the map again. I would like to go over to their parcel, and I want to first point where most of this is happening, okay? Then I want to point to where their product, their debris has been stored. So first, you'll see, okay. Most of it is happening here, even further down. This is our fence lines, and literally flush against the fence are logs that are breaking down, turning into mulch, piles of disorganized heaps of logs, of tree trunks, of debris, against touching our fences, particularly my next door neighbor. All of this is visible, all of this is audible. I may not have the right terminology because I'm a lay person, but in my statement, I said something about it's very industrial. Well, I don't really know what that means, but it's certainly not selling something. It's not, out of the three things that qualify as commercial in your definition of it, this is a service industry, but take a closer look. It's a dumping ground for what they're doing. The trees are not from that property. They're hauled in. They're dumped very loudly. It's very unsightly, just heaps all over the place. And like somebody said, like Zach said earlier, people are complaining because the logs that are abutting the fence, touching the fences, are breaking down, and it is a haven for rodents. We've never had this problem before. So rodents in our yards, you can just sit there and watch them. They're, it's like for my neighbor, it owns the place. But that's been a concern. It's been a nuisance. I believe it's a public health hazard, and it does affect the enjoyment of our land, of our backyards. I noticed that there's a lot of talk about the frontage of the property and how it needs to look from the road. Can we point out what's in back of them on their southern border? Us. Private residences that have to see this. This is very far back from the road, but their stuff is right on top of us. The debris, all of that comes with a tree service. And I think the video that's going to be shown may show some of the what I call industrial equipment. It's not a chipper, it's a tub grinder. Massive, super loud, early in the morning. No explanation, no kind of neighborly heads up, nothing like that. Just tremendous noise, vibration. And that's going on closer to our home, closer to my home than it is to the home that's already there. So they have processed, in my opinion, in preparation for this meeting, they've been, practically, not around the clock, but practically processing the logs there, the trees there that have been there for months and months at a time. And so that grinder was going and going and going. And then they make fires to burn the rest. This is not a fire pit fire. It's massive, massive fire. it looked controlled, I'll give it that, but it's scary. Closer to my home than the home that's on that property, so that no one has to be bothered on the commercial corridor, Hayden Avenue, but yet we have to absorb that unsightliness. So let me just look through my statement that I do want to share right now. And I'm going to take a little sip of water.
Alan, the time?
She's representing a group that, 15, is it?
Okay.
Plus the video time.
What's that?
And the video time is included in that, so however long.
Are you guys watching that?
Yeah.
Okay, the FLUM, F-L-U-M, may indicate that the commercial development of this site is consistent with the predominant character of the immediate vicinity. There is much verbiage regarding the responsibility to put buffer between this business and Hayden Avenue. However, for the private residents to the south of this property who have been impacted by the management and activities on this property, we want to remind all that we are an important part of this immediate vicinity. We are concerned that the city's FLUM may not address properly the land to the south in equal measure to the businesses that line the Hayden Avenue corridor. Okay. I want to address item number 3 that's in this plan proposal, the Hayden Comprehensive Plan. Okay. According to the definition of commercial that the HCP has set forth, this is not a small retail business or professional offices. It is a service-oriented business, but like I said earlier, it seems to be a dumping ground for their service-oriented business, almost like, you know, a transfer station. People and commercial businesses bring their debris to the transfer station, pay their commercial fee, and leave their business there. This is like a substitute for that, this land here. At least that's how it's been used up to this point. And what we believe is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And that includes the inability or the difficulty of the city to keep up with this kind of thing, where you have commercial or light industrial zones abutting residential areas. Who's available to come and give proper surveillance, to implement, you know, regulations? Who's available to do that? Not many. Not many. And so in my statement, when I mentioned, I don't use words right because I'm just a lay person, but I said the City of Hayden infrastructure, what I was talking about was really like planning and zoning. Are you able to absorb the amount, the frequency with which these zones, you know, are abut one another? Because that's where the problems arise, and we want to live in peace. We really do, but it's difficult to manage this, I think, for the city. So that's why I feel a responsibility to be here. Okay, let me keep going. Some of the activity that we have seen here with the large machinery, that it seems like it would be more appropriate, like on North Government Way. This is just to give you a picture of what's going on here and where I've seen likewise activity, you know, between Lancaster, up on Government Way North, where, you know, the big dirt piles are that they're, so that's what it reminds me of, and that's where it looks like it would be more appropriate. So we don't know how this land will be used in the future. They didn't have to submit a plan, but of course we're very concerned, and you know, our hope is that the commission would make strong recommendations to the council. about how to handle this particular area. It has not been handled. I don't believe that the property has been using, the land use has not been appropriate, in my opinion. That's what I'm trying to say. When you consider what's at their southern border, and please consider that, don't just look at the direction of development, but how they're impacting the backside. So I think cars driving up and down Hayden Avenue probably don't care as much as the people who have to live against it. Okay, our land use concerns. Our taxes go up every year significantly. Can you manage the tremendous growth? And is it exceeding your ability to monitor it and surveil it and send inspectors when there are problems? Because you need to see it on the spot. I will tell you that law enforcement does not really want to be involved in this. They don't. I know that was mentioned to me as a solution. I don't like that solution. I want the problem fixed, but not like on the spot, you're in trouble, that's not how I want this dealt with, with law enforcement. That just doesn't seem right.
Sure. Elena, I am going to be very transparent with you, and I apologize. We didn't mark, you normally get 15 minutes for a group representation.
Okay.
My internal clock says we're hitting that mark, so could I ask you please?
Well, okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
And then a minute.
Why don't we show?
Thank you.
Then how about, I know my neighbor wanted to show that video.
I appreciate it, and I hope you don't mind me.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you press escape, it should be up. I can pull it up right here.
I do want to mention the transitional zone too, that's talked about in the comprehensive plan.
Would you like me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, and so that was the activity that was going on leading up to this meeting. Piles of that tree debris all over the property, getting processed just as quickly as possible. So, I wish there was, I wish I knew and understood what a transitional zone would be. There's a lot I don't understand about how this all works, but I'm learning quickly. But I think for the sake of the people on Tory Lane at their south border, to really consider taking a strong look at this. This is not a pleasant use for, of the land in terms of our experience. It's very much different to their west, how they use it. It's not, there's noise, yes, but not the kind of disruption and disturbance that we see on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, we don't have anyone else? Okay, so the applicant is able to offer a rebuttal against anything that was given as testimony. You cannot bring up anything new.
Okay. So, yes, we have had some activity there recently. It was 3 days, and we did process a lot of material that had been hauled back to my property. my approach with my company and the growth and the development of the area is to make this an exceptionally professional facility. We're gonna pave as much as possible. We're gonna do everything that's required. We're gonna put the buffer in the back, such as my neighbor has done for these homes. We will not be hauling back material to this property any longer. We are actually trying to purchase additional property for a dump site, and we will be utilizing Cannon Hill 100% of the time. Our goal is to put in a building. It is the exact same size as the building next door over the fence. It is going to be situated a little bit differently, but it's going to have pavement, parking, all of the proper developmental necessary needs, including swales, buffering. We're going to do probably more than a 20-foot buffer, including a berm. We'll put arborvitaes. I'm a tree care facility. We're going to maintenance this stuff to the highest level possible. This facility that we're planning to build here is going to be the nicest tree care facility in the whole Northwest, just about. I can guarantee there's nobody locally that's going to have anything like this. And I agree. I would be a little upset with where she's at. You go down the street from me a half a mile, and I have a competitor that has mountains of crap and has been there for years. And I'm taking a new approach because I don't like that. And I don't want them to deal with this. I agree. Our intent is to have a facility where, yes, my trucks will come and go. We generally do a 4-day week. We don't even work weekends, and unless it's a necessary, a storm or something like that. Yes, we have a burn pit out there. It is legal. We have permits. It is a 10 by 10 log structure. The fire department was there the other day. They showed up. They said, hi, yep, looks good. It's compliant. They left. Obviously, these neighbors are calling every entity on me at this point that they possibly can. And we are complying. If you come out to this property right now, it's virtually just an empty lot. Everything is gone. We have a little bit of firewood left, but it's gone. There is nothing there. And you can come out at 8 in the morning if you'd like to see it. My goal, like I said, is take a new approach to the tree care industry. Because yes, some of the people that I have to say are my competitors, they don't represent our industry well. And I'm not trying to create a dump site here like this. I was thrust into a removal off of my last property a few years ago, and I did end up bringing some debris to this property because I was forced off of a property that a purchase agreement fell out from underneath me when they decided to up my costs just way too much during the process. So I brought some over and we processed this to make it clear. The reality is when I bought this property, the grass was as high as I am tall. I had to buy a field mower. And when I was buying, when I bought this mower, when I was mowing, the mice were just flying out from underneath the mower. It is a field. There's fields everywhere. These field mice and these rodents are everywhere out there. There's voles. It isn't my fault that there's 3,000 acres out here of fields and there's mice in them. I have no control over that. And the fact of the matter is from Hayden Avenue to that back fence, both sides of me, it's commercial. The city sent us papers in, I believe, April, saying that we were going to be rezoned commercially 100% front to back by the middle of May. And then for whatever happened, that was pulled. All of that property in question along there, we were notified was going commercial. So that's when I started approaching developers, and then it all fell out. So that's why we're here today. This whole facility is going to be mostly pavement, a nice big building, proper parking, proper buffers, everything. There's going to be no room to be dumping materials here anyways at that point. And we're going to put, like I said, everything into it. This is going to be a top-class facility. And And for somebody to put judgment on me, you know, like the Bible says, that's God's place to judge one another. My intent here is definitely to do right by everybody. We only had that chipper in there for 3 days. It wasn't like this is a daily organization. We made sure that we go by compliance. I don't think the chipper started up before 8, and it was shut off by about 3:30 every day, and it was only 3 days. You know, it's not like we have massive industrial equipment out here. No, the reality is it's no different than the neighbor. My trucks leave in the morning, we go do a job, and we come back. Right now, I've got trucks parked out there. I do. I was definitely, as a first-time commercial property owner, I went by their word. It's fine. It happened. But we're here to correct anything that I've done wrong. Like I said, I cleaned the property up, and I have never had a single complaint, ever, not one, until all of this has come about, till we brought the chippers in, and we're trying to now zone it all commercial. I've never had a neighbor come and talk to me with a complaint. Once in a while, we've burned, and we have one guy over the fence saying, hey, you got a permit, hey, and we always do. We always comply. It's not like a junkyard out there by any means. I've got over $1 million in tree care equipment out there. It's all top quality equipment. Every one of my customers tells me I have the nicest equipment around. I run a very reputable company. And my intent is to make this facility top class, just like my company is.
All right, thank you, Don.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone have any further questions in the commission?
No.
No.
All right, I'm going to close the hearing. No more questions or comments will be allowed from the public. To the commission, do you wish to proceed or schedule deliberations for another date?
Proceed.
Proceed, I hear proceed. Ben, we'll start with you. Make it random.
I mean, I get where the neighbors are coming from, but if I was gonna move forward, I think it does meet the standards of approval, I would like to add or amend it to or whatever to have.
Condition?
Yeah, condition for the most aggressive landscape buffer that would be allowed for commercial use. If there's only, maybe there is only one, but that would be my only thing going forward. I mean, that noise was obnoxious, hearing the backup alarm of a skid steer, but I think the owner has demonstrated that he's trying to do what's best with the land, and having lived in that, and I do live in that neighborhood, and I live on Torrey, and we have mice, and I have it's not because there's any commercial activity going on behind me, it's because we live on Torrey and there's fields outside our neighborhood. So, yeah, I think it meets the standards of approval. We just need to make sure that the landscape buffer goes in.
Okay, Keith?
I agree. The only other thing I would add to that would be condition on maybe some fencing as well. Better fencing or...
Yeah, it's got to be a requirement. Anytime you jump from one zone to another, there's a fence requirement.
That's fine.
All right, super.
I think that it makes sense for the entire property to be commercial.
Okay.
I think that to have any other zone behind it just doesn't fit. So I would just agree with Ben that it needs to have an aggressive landscape buffer and on short order.
Okay. Sean, do you have any, how do you feel about the standards of approval?
I think they met them. I think actually, in this case, this is going to be a condition, or when they change the zone, it's going to improve the experience for the neighbors because it's going to require the landscape buffer. And I think somewhat in the opposition, she kind of answered the question. She said that the neighbor next door, they don't hear it. It has this beautiful fence. That's what's going to be required of this property now. So I think actually rezoning it commercial and having consistent zoning across this parcel is going to benefit the neighbors.
Okay.
So just so you're all aware, commercial butted up against residential, single family requires the most restrictive landscape buffer, which is a type 1. It's 20 feet wide, and it is a buffer so that the trees and shrubbery literally grow together to create a secondary fence on top of the fence that we'll already have. That's required in code without any
Yes, I think it'll actually help the neighbors' experience.
additional
quite a bit.
conditions.
So we basically have the two choices, to leave it in ambiguity or ambiguous, where we don't know what's going to happen to it. And that certainly that wouldn't motivate the owners to make any improvements if they're going to wait and see what happens. So in addition to my belief that it meets the standards of approval, I also believe that changing it to commercial would expedite the improvements necessary. I do note, and I do want to acknowledge, because the public brought it up, there are definitely some allowed uses in commercial and some not allowed uses in commercial, and some of what I heard as a layman don't meet those. So, but we're not here to enforce law or judge or anything. I don't know if it's probably not required to say that it's, that we would approve it with the condition that they must stick to what is allowed in commercial, or can we do that?
What we would ask for is, let's say it was approved, we would say in the application that we requested, can you please submit a detailed narrative describing exactly what's going on this site, so that staff can assess where it fits in the table of allowed uses and make a determination whether this is something that can be allowed in the commercial zone, or if it involves activities that are prohibited and may not be allowed.
Right.
And so that would be one of the things that they would have to submit in order to move forward, just so we can place it correctly.
So what I'm hearing you say is, one, yes, the checks and balances are in there. And two, I guess the point of my bringing that up is I want to make sure the applicant is aware of what is allowed and what is not allowed in commercial. So if you guys are taking care of that, then that's great. Okay, so we've all shared our thoughts. Does anyone want to deliberate anymore, or does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, do you have the case number?
Nope. It's this one.
Second one.
Okay. I'll make a motion in the case of PZE-21-0264, that we approve that we recommend to City Council that this property be zoned commercial in its entirety.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, should we take roll?
Ben, you seconded it. Okay. Chair Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Vice Chair Taylor.
Yes.
What's that? Yep. All right, so moving on to the next bit of business, do we have any reports from the city?
Tomorrow night is city council. This is one of those quirky months that the P Z meetings and the city council meetings keep letting up against each other on the same week.
What time is that?
Long night.
5.
It's at 5.
5, thank you.
There is a request for reconsideration on tomorrow night's council meeting agenda. The request from Aspen Homes, which was recommended for approval by Planning and Zoning Commission, was denied at City Council, and they have come back with a request for reconsideration to the City Council, and that will be heard. Whether or not, it won't be heard. The council will decide at the meeting tomorrow night whether or not they are going to reconsider it.
Which would be allowing another public hearing.
A second public hearing with City Council.
Which would come back to us? Or
No.
just
Go to
City
council. Just before City Council. That's part of the whole kind of process of checks and balances.
Oh, yeah.
Which one was it?
We did,
Which one was that?
Aspen Homes' request for mixed use instead of commercial on the southwest corner of Hayden and Ramsey.
Okay, Hayden Ramsey, now I remember that.
Yep.
We have on the city council agenda, we have some proposed possible language for reinstating the public hearing for the zone map amendments. And so they had requested that we kind of look and see when those codes had changed. Is my presentation still up there somewhere?
Yes, we can pull it up from the workshop today.
Second public hearing to city council. So, yeah, the one that I had. Can you scroll down a ways?
Yeah.
Yeah, history one, the history one. I did some research this weekend. We had kind of talked at the city council meeting about reinstating second public hearings with city council, similar to what we had done previously. And so Brett and I were both thinking that we had changed the subdivision code to have a second public hearing as well, but we hadn't. So we did find that Ordinance 608 that was approved in March of 2020 did basically have a planning and zoning hearing, public hearing, and then put a public meeting in place with city council instead of doing two, kind of following Idaho statutes, which that was kind of their reasoning. But prior to that was always a public hearing with planning and zoning and always a public hearing with city council. So that's kind of the one that we've kind of opted to provide language for. While I was doing research, trying to figure out when the subdivision code changed, I found that prior to 2000, there was always one hearing before city council for major subdivisions. The planning and zoning was established as a commission in 2000, and at that point in time, subdivisions came to the Planning and Zoning Commission by public hearing, and they were recommended to City Council as a public meeting. And then in Ordinance number 339 in 2003, they actually added language. It provided language very similar to today, with the only opportunity for public hearing with the city council through the appeal process. So it was still a public meeting. If they appealed it, they could get to a public hearing. And then in Ordinance 398 in 2005, we actually added the language that we have today, has not changed, that allowed for planning and zoning to hear it by public hearing, make recommendations to the city council. But if they were to say we want a cul-de-sac and you were to say no, we want it to be a through street, then it would require a public hearing with planning and zoning, and they would hear it as such. So the direction from my direction previously was to bring the zone map forward, but we were going to talk about that at the workshop, just so you guys all heard it. That's basically the slide I'm presenting tomorrow night for city council. You got it a day early. Other than that, we've just got projects coming down the pike.
Okay. So we're ready to adjourn then?
And I think this is our last meeting this month because the 21st is
President's
a
Day.
holiday, so we'll see you in March.
All right, so everybody march, we're adjourned.